Beyond Survival is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute. Our desire is to equip you as a follower of Jesus to thrive. Each episode reveals how the gospel impacts the entire human experience for the advancement of God's kingdom. Ultimately, Jesus' promise of abundant life means we are meant to go beyond survival. So, let's jump in with today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Beyond Survival podcast. We are here with Jud Simmons. And so thanks for taking time out of your day of running major corporations and businesses. Talking way too much. Hey, but we are in really the ending of a series of episodes that talks about regular rhythms. And we were just talking about before here, we've been interviewing different people intentionally that have different personalities, different stories, walks of life, even age demographic. Of course, you, Jud, represent the younger.
Good.
Yes, it's age demographic.
That's really good to hear. I was curious where I was on that continuum.
Oh, absolutely,
now I know.
Absolutely. And I have been really encouraged knowing you and your wife Rebecca for many years, being able to even personally, work with and mentor your two boys, of just your faithfulness and your consistency. And I think we have a lot to learn from that. So I'm excited to jump into this. But before we do that, and I guess I've kind of ruined a little bit of the surprise. Tell us about Jud. Who are you? What, family, work, even stuff you love to do just to have fun.
So I work in public relations for a nuclear energy company. We've lived here in Lynchburg since about 2008.
Yep.
Two sons, one is a junior in high school, one finished college and has his first job. Yes.
Yay. First real job.
That's right. That's right. He's rolling. He's rolling. And then my wife, Rebecca, works in school administration. And been coming to Waymaker about 13 years now.
Yeah.
Just love it. A tremendous impact on our family, on our marriage. So many good friends here, and really respect what this church continues to do for the community and for the church very broadly.
Yeah. What does it mean to be in public relations for a nuclear company?
Right.
What does that mean?
People have a lot of questions about what we do, or we may have a message that's important to communicate.
Yeah.
So either way, a lot of that runs through my shop. I'm super fortunate, work with just a ton of really talented people. Great place to go every day.
Yeah. Can you can you confirm that Waymaker Church has utilized your giftings and talents in certain marketing messages?
I may or may not have had some input occasionally into some messages that were put together.
It's hey, Jud, help us out. No, but it's been really cool. You definitely have a gift and a talent for that. So what? You've done something really exciting. You just got back from a trip.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I went to Nepal. I went hiking in Nepal for a couple of weeks. Got all the way up to the base camp that you would then launch to go to Mount Everest if you wanted to.
Wow.
I had zero desire to climb the mountain, but to hike up to about 17,000 feet. It was fascinating. It was a real adventure. It was physically the most difficult thing I have ever done. But tremendously rewarding. Got to go with some great folks. Got to meet a ton of people from literally around the world. Wouldn't trade it for anything, but I don't plan to go back. It was pretty taxing.
Yeah, that is.
My
husband and I just watched a documentary on people hiking Mount Everest on Disney Plus. It was really good, but the whole time we were like, are these people okay?
Who does this?
By
choice?
Why are they subjecting themselves, all the gear they had to wear, and there was a huge line, they're on the side of the mountain in a ginormous line, and at any moment, an avalanche, their fingers could freeze off. We were just we'll watch you guys do it, but that's amazing that you at least did some of that.
Yeah, I would never want to go to that far. Climbing the mountain just looks like no fun. And the investment of time and money and energy and getting, that's not something that appeals to me. But to go hike in the Himalayas for a week, just incredible.
Wow.
Just no photo will ever do it justice. So you kind of got to be there.
Yeah,
that would be the true Beyond Survival podcast if we just brought on people who've climbed Mount Everest.
I should have just remoted in. I could have just called
that would have been
called in.
Yes.
Next time.
Opportunity.
Next time.
But you said there wasn't going to be a next time. You said that was a one and done.
Good point.
One-time thing. Oh, that's
so
cool.
would it be appropriate to say that you hiked to Mount Everest?
No,
would
really.
that be politically correct?
That would be nice to say, but you actually, we hiked to the base camp.
Okay.
Matter of fact, there in the base camp, you can barely see Mount Everest. And when you get up to about 17,000 feet, you're essentially measured from sea level. You're only halfway there. You still have it. You got to get up to about 35,000 feet, give or take, to actually get to the mountain. So,
okay.
Wow.
All right. So you would say you hiked in the Himalayas.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Dang, that would have been so awesome.
That close. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Wow.
What was there ever a moment was there ever an oh crap moment for you while you were hiking, or was it pretty tame?
I think my biggest concern was about day 2 or 3. I realized that everything I was doing required more air than I had. Tying your shoes, you get winded. Putting your sleeping bag in the container it comes in, you get winded. Rolling over in your sleeping bag at some point, you get winded. At least I did. Just having enough air to keep going was tough. So the strategy was just go slow. Take your time. When you get too tired, stop. Check out the mountains, and then keep going. So there was no hurry.
Was there like a spiritual aspect to being in the Himalayas? Like, did you consider like the characteristic of God or just time? What was that? Yeah,
before I went, a good friend of mine, actually from high school, he sent me a note. He said, "Hey, Jud," he said, "look for God in the mountains." He said, "If you look at the Bible, look at how many times God interacts with people in the mountains." He said, "Don't miss that." Which I would not have thought about that.
Yeah.
And so as I'm trucking along with my poles and I'm thinking, well, I'm looking for God, and just, insights about him or the journey or, the character of him and the character of what we ought to be. There were definitely some insights that went far beyond just the physical struggle of hauling it up the mountain every day. Absolutely.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, I never thought about that. Like God met a lot of people on the mountain, did a lot of things on the mountain.
Yeah.
What's like the first thing that comes to mind? So if I say, hey, regular rhythms or spiritual disciplines, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I think, unfortunately, the first thing that comes to mind is this is something I have to do.
Ah, yes.
Because when you hear discipline,
finally, honesty.
Yeah, discipline is never really fun, right? Yeah. But I think it's like a lot of things. You realize that so many things of value in your life come from regular practice, whether that's exercise or rhythms with your family, whatever that is. I think spiritual disciplines that are very much that way. I wish we had a different word for it. I think it's the right word, but if there was a different word, people might find them more accessible. But that doesn't negate the fact they're really worth digging into.
Yes. So spiritual disciplines needs a PR person to help.
Here to serve.
That's so good. I love how your brain just thinks that way. Like that's literally, and you're right, because you hear the word discipline and it's like no one thinks positively, yet there is something positive that it cultivates in us. Like that's the whole purpose of it. So that's pretty cool. So okay, hey, can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Do I have your permission?
You know it.
Okay. So here's the deal. Explain to me what brings a man to not only learn clogging, but then show off your clogging skills to your college freshman classmates.
Someone has sold me out. So I really don't know how to answer that. I'll try because you asked, and I respect you. I respect you too, but I'll give it a shot. So, when I was a kid, so clogging is like tap dancing, but some extra stuff, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it.
I had to look. I looked it up.
Did you look it up?
I looked it up because I wanted to. I think I had a picture in my mind, but then I was like, I got to look up on Google.
Right.
Wow.
And so my mom had got me involved in that because she said I needed to be balanced. I wasn't sure if she meant like balanced in a variety of things or not falling down, but either way, that was that's what she told me. And so for years, we traveled around the Southeast clogging. We got to go to several places doing that. So we get to college, and there's a dance that the freshman class put on, and apparently they needed some comic relief, and so they asked me to do that, and that just shows the, kind of.
You
script.
said yes.
I had to represent, right? I mean, you can't just say no. So although maybe I wish I would have given the conversation now.
Who would have thought these years later we'd be?
So you're wearing clogs in this type of dance? That's what I'm picturing in my head.
Yeah, so think dress shoes with taps on the end, and so whenever you step, you get a click noise.
Oh, okay.
And so the more you move your ankles, the more clicks you get. Okay. And so you just basically think square dancing, with taps.
Okay.
People who really clog professionally or more seriously than I did are probably cringing at this explanation because I'm really simpling it up.
Okay.
I don't think we've reached that audience yet.
Well, if you get any cards and letters, then you'll know why.
So what I'm hearing is that you can dance, maybe. Like you have rhythm?
I wouldn't go that far.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I was advancing that direction.
Okay.
I think that was the journey I was on, and then I found tennis or something else. So, yeah.
Okay. So you could have been there, but you went a different path.
Right.
Okay.
I took up other hobbies like hiking, for example.
Okay, that's a more common hobby there.
Right.
That is so funny.
If there's video of this, we've got to have it.
Oh, man.
Mercifully, when I was in college, very few videos were made.
Okay. Yes.
Right. And if they were, then I will try to keep them under wraps.
Yes.
Oh, that's so great.
I won't tell you who gave me that information, but I will say that Rebecca was very happy to give it to me.
I had some idea of where that may have come from. So got it. Good to know. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
We'll chat later.
Yeah. Yep. So good.
Yeah. So we are talking about regular rhythms, and like I opened with, everyone is different, and I think what we've been discovering is different personalities represent or relate to God differently, like because it is a relationship. So can you describe some of the regular rhythms that you've had that have cultivated your relationship with Jesus?
I think for me, by far, the biggest one has been prayer.
Okay.
And it's been regular prayer for a long, long time. I remember as a kid in high school laying in bed at night, kind of praying. And over time, that has evolved. And so that's always been very important time for me. And, and there's some days you miss and you don't do it all the time. But spending, a fair amount of time doing that daily over time, I think helped me develop. And really, in a lot of ways, just kind of helped me process my thoughts about what am I doing? What do I think about God? What do I think about church? In various churches we were in, as things would change or as my beliefs would be enhanced by new ideas.
Yes.
I think you have to process that. And so, as prayer becomes less, God give me and more, God, here's what I'm thinking. What, how should we process that? I think the conversation changes, at least it has for me over time. So I think that for me, that's been the most important one, the most consistent one.
Yeah. So, so you talked about how prayer in your prayer life has changed and evolved over time, which I think is really important, right? Because if you think about any relationship, you don't just do the same old things. Like there's a natural progression. Prayer in the early days maybe was more asking like, hey, get your list. I remember that, having my list on my phone and like walking through stuff. Fast forward, what does prayer look like now for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more talking to God about, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what's on my mind. And so, get up in the morning, get a cup of coffee. The house is still quiet. Nobody else is awake. I'm, not everybody in my home is a morning person, which makes it really nice when when you need some downtime. So, get a cup of coffee. I just walk around the house. It's still pretty dark. And I'm just praying to God. Either here's what I'm thinking, or, this would be good, or maybe we're mulling this over. Here's what I'm asking for my family and me. There's what I'm asking for my friends. But really, it being more conversational. God knows what I need. I'm not going to break out a surprise on God on a Tuesday morning. He knows where we are. But I do think he's probably, my opinion, I think he's interested in what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And letting him, kind of help guide my thoughts that I think right. Maybe I pray for somebody who needs it, but then I'm thinking, well, what else can I do? Right.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of thing is a super useful way to see prayer that makes it less rote and less more about what I need and more, kind of what should I be?
Wow. That's really good. I like the way that really the picture that you have just painted in regards to prayer, which is this conversation. It is both what you're thinking and also what you're feeling. And then you're even allowing God to then speak into those things to help shape and mold. What do you look, I guess, what can you identify maybe that's been cultivated in your life or produced because of that regular rhythm? Like, how are you different?
Well, that's a great question. When I was a kid praying, you memorize the Lord's Prayer, and I would literally at night, go like section at a time because very straightforward in my thinking. Then, Father in heaven, hallowed be Thy name, Thy kingdom come. So I'm kind of doing things over that. Over time, that kind of morphs to, like I said, how should I be thinking? And so, for example, I'll play through a conversation, with God, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this or saying this or going down this path. What does that sound like? Well, God, if I was going to do that, I would do this and I would say that. And so, sometimes you bounce thoughts against other people. That's kind of my way about bouncing that against God. Yeah. And I think when you're in a prayerful mindset, you're more open to what should that really be. Asking God to, not just, bless your plans, but to, plan your blessings, asking Him to be involved in that. And I think that's tough to do when we're busy. Everybody has a different rhythm, but it's hard to do. At least I find it very difficult to do when I'm distracted. So I don't have music around. It's, like I said, it's super quiet. Everybody can have a different pattern, but that's mine.
Yeah. So you remove like actual distractions from your environment that helps you to engage in prayer.
Absolutely. And I find if I get to a point where things are distracting, I don't end up praying. If I were to have to get up and go someplace immediately, I will completely forget. I won't even pray in the car. I'll just, because I'm focused on what I'm doing. So so that requires me to carve that time out. So it's pretty intentional.
Wow.
So what I hear is that because you've had this rhythm in your life, it has allowed you to be more open and receptive to what God, like His plans, His desires. You've intentionally positioned your life to just be open and receive what God has versus just doing your own ways and hoping that God blesses you along the way. Hopefully He helps you along the way. So.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if we talk about having a relationship with Jesus Christ, any relationship we have requires time spent at some level. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's different ways to spend time with God. Lots of ways to get there. Prayer is not the only way, but that's my way. That's my way of thinking, okay, I'm carving this time out. Yeah. The Lord and I are going to spend some time together. Yeah. And that I find that very grounding for the rest of the day. You don't know what's coming. You don't know what your day is going to be like. Everybody has challenges, but it's good to kind of start thinking, well, I started out with something super important. And so, I'm kind of squared away in terms of my mind, and hopefully I can go do, good things after that.
That's really good. So let's kind of shift gears. So you've got this staple, this anchor in your life. Can you describe a moment in your life where things were really difficult? Maybe you experienced kind of in your life a survival mode where just things maybe felt like they were falling apart or just really difficult. Describe that season and then how that rhythm helped in that potentially.
Yeah, great question. If I go back roughly 10 years, I got an unexpected cancer diagnosis. Didn't see it coming, no symptoms, had no idea, this is where we were going to end up. Everything turned out fine, super blessed, got great care. But so the doctor gives you that bad news. And so the next morning it's time to pray. Well, hey God, that's not what I had on the docket, right? Wow. And so that was a fascinating time of prayer, right? Going through that, sorting out treatments and figuring out how that was going to end up. So for me that was, hey God, we have this relationship. This didn't surprise you, surprised me. What are we going to do, right? What does this look like? What does this look like for me and how I need to take care of myself, for my relationships? And so I found it easier to work that out, talking to Him and running through that stuff in my mind. Sometimes you say something to somebody and think, man, it really didn't come out right. But if you're talking to the Creator, he's got some flexibility. He's got some tolerance. Yeah. He's heard a lot of stuff, right, from incredibly difficult circumstances of people. So, I really felt that He was listening to me. And it helped me kind of process my thoughts because, I still had a family and a job and responsibilities, and you can't just stop things when you get, even bad news like that. So I think it helped me.
What were some of the raw feelings and emotions that were felt in you and even your family after that news?
Well, yeah. I mean, you think, why me? You can't help but think that. What did I do that caused this?
Yeah.
What could I have changed? How will this impact my future? Right? It can be, something, less important, like a change in your life. It can be something dramatically important, like, tremendously bad news. And what I went through is not nearly the difficulty that other people have suffered from. I don't want to make it out to be that at all. There's people who've gone through that much more difficult time than I had. So I want to, I don't want to say that.
Sure.
But everybody has to kind of process where they are. Yeah. So I think there was some of that, but it was also, okay, what am I going to do for my kids, right? Where do I need to be for them during this time of sorting out what I'm going to do, going through my treatments, going through recovery? Who do I need to be for other people, right? Not just for me. So, I think prayer kind of helps you think beyond yourself a little bit.
Yeah. So when you started early on in your journey as a follower of Jesus of cultivating this, it wasn't like you sat there and be like, hey, one day I'm going to be diagnosed with cancer and this is really going to help me. It was just like, hey, I'm going to do this to cultivate a relationship with Jesus. But then you found that you talk about the next day, that was kind of this is what I do.
That's what I do. That's right.
And help process that journey with God through prayer.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to see it, because if you think about a rhythm is consistent, right? Well, you're going to have highs and you're going to have lows, and things will bounce along that line of how you feel or what's going on in your life. But if you have something consistent, in your life, that's tremendously helpful. It's very grounding. It can be prayer, it can be other disciplines, it can be other things. It doesn't have to be just that. But having something that is a regular rhythm, a discipline, we talked about that word a while ago, it's tremendously, it's a foundation that everything else can work against. So that's how I have found it.
Yeah, that's so good.
Wow. What do you think your life would look like, your family would look like, if that was not a regular habit and part of your everyday life?
That's a really good question. I think it's important that we as humans have something greater than ourselves going on. And I think prayer has helped me be aware of that. So when I get up in the morning, I'm thinking, well, we're going to do this today and ball games tonight, and we got to get groceries and all these things that are just kind of the run of life things that we're blessed to be able to do, even from that standpoint. But all things that have to be done. So if you have kind of that regular time that you say, okay, this is, for example, I heard this, I read this in the Bible, I heard this at church, I have a respected friend who told me this thing, so I'm kind of mulling that over in my prayer. Well, what does that look like as a father? What does that look like as a husband? And I can kind of think through how will I then act or think or be. I don't know that you get there in the regular busyness of life. I think, at least for me, I really have to carve that special time out.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like without having that time carved out, you're not able to get to a place where you're not just thinking about yourself. Right. And not just thinking about, okay, I've got to get this done and I've got to get this done, and therefore not making space to hear the direction that God wants you to go in, or the things he wants you to say, or how he wants you to serve. Without that space, you're just very focused on you.
Yeah, that's a really good way to say it, Sophia. I think it's, life gets really tactical once the day starts. And so it's hard to be strategic. It's hard to think, used to work for guys who would say, think lofty thoughts. It's hard to do that when you're right in the middle of doing whatever your occupation or your family situation requires you to. So I think you have to carve that time out, morning, noon, evening. I mean, tons of biblical examples of different ways and times to do that. But I don't get it done unless I make that time.
Man, that's really good. It's kind of like the idea of taking a moment to set your minds on, to take what that guy said, lofty thoughts, but as Scripture would say, on things above. Set your mindset, ponder, think about good things, noble things, things above, eternal things, which then inform how you go about all the other things. And for you, prayer has been that way for that to happen. That's really good. So what has been a rhythm in your life that you struggled with the most? Maybe that you had a desire to cultivate this and it's just been difficult for you.
One that's probably not my favorite would be fasting. That's never been a high one. I know that may be an easy one. I see value in that, but that's not something I have regularly cultivated. Some of the things I've been studying, we talked about the discipline of silence. Now that in some ways that goes with prayer because I don't have anything on, but I'm not being silent. I'm really cranking through, thoughts in my mind. So, taking time to, for silence and rest, that's hanging out and just resting. That's not on my docket. So,
it's not productive enough.
I gotta get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
So I think, there's definitely time to look at some of those more restful ones as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy. It's kind of an easy choice in America where we have so many things going on and you have a family and you're doing things. But yeah, taking some time, like a solid chunk of your day or your, weekend or whatever and saying, I'm going to devote this to something, not what I normally would do. That's kind of tough. But I've thought more about that and done some of that. And there's a lot of value there.
That's pretty cool. Which too just shows the idea of always growing. Not reaching a place where you're like, okay, I've reached the mountaintop, but that there's always this idea, how we would say this new and deeper with God that He wants to cultivate in us. And I love that you have that kind of. You're still like, hey, I want to pursue other things and more rhythms. As can we talk about you as a father? Yeah, with 2 boys. What did you see as your role as a father? To help cultivate a relationship with your boys? What did that look like? How'd you do that? I know it's super broad, but...
Yeah, so super blessed that my wife Rebecca is just amazing, and
put it back on
the
her.
That's right. The answer
Rebecca.
is marry somebody who knows, who's super sharp. That's the easiest way. I think she and I we have different skills, and it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about being a father. In my mind, it's more being one of two parents.
Yeah.
And so I think it looked different for us over time. When they're first born, you're just trying to win the day. I mean, we used to say,
can we get an amen?
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, you would feel super blessed if you just got 1 hour to do what you wanted to do, because everything else is you're working, you're cleaning, So early on, it was let's give our kids stability and calm and let them know they're loved. Let's have a schedule. Let's do this so they have that framework. So it goes from that to now you fast forward later and your son calls you and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm thinking about this job situation. What do you think? Hey, Pop, I'm working through this, trying to figure out my classes. Hey, I got to balance these needs for sports and social and friends." So it changes. It's early on, you're like I say, you're just trying to keep them healthy. There comes a point where they have far more complex questions. So I think as a parent, thinking how do I equip myself over time for that? The good news is, if everything goes well and you have 18 to 20 years with them, if everybody's healthy and things go well, you have that time, so you get to grow with them. But being intentional is really, really, I think, a big key to that. So, but yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to do that alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
How do you create an environment where Jack and Henry actually want to ask you guys, how do you create the space where they would come to Mom and Dad and say, "Hey, I'm thinking through this," or "Can you help me with this?" How do you cultivate that?
I think part of that is, they need to see Mom and Dad talking openly about subjects of substance and value. And so when they see that, they say, okay, free flow of exchange of ideas is okay here. And we will talk about something that is worth talking about. So I think you start there. I think when they have something to say that may need to be calibrated a little bit, it's not really the time to drop the hammer, in my opinion. That's a time, the phrase "tell me more about that" can get you a long way, and that's not original to me. I stole that, but just asking to pull some of that out, right? And taking time to understand and listen and learn before you start tinkering and calibrating and teaching. I wish I had done that better. Looking back on it now, the times that we did that worked out pretty well. The times that we did not take the energy to do that, I'm not proud of that. So I think you learn over time.
Wow. That's really good. I'm literally thinking about last night. So Sophia and I were in community group. Our families are, and we were talking about like how sometimes the parents didn't maybe set the environment or cultivate the environment where conversations you said of substance, as I think you said it, could be talked about. And so there maybe wasn't the freedom or the level of comfort when those conversations need to be talked about. We just say, where do we go? Where do we go to be educated on this thing or that thing? So we'd go to the world, And so I think that right there is gold, where you say, as a parent, you're trying to cultivate an environment to talk about things of substance, to make it almost normal, and where there's not judgment or like a quick, harsh rebuke, but there's an openness. So that later on, when more difficult things come up, they feel like they can come, and it's a safe environment.
Yeah, and over time, you hope some of that, becomes cyclical. So, for example, now there will be times when something needs to be discussed in the family, and I don't want to talk about it, right? But one of my sons will say, "Hey, we need to talk about this. We need to deal with this." And I go, "Oh, you're right." Right? And so, but that's what you want, right? I mean, the whole point of our parenting is to have functional, useful adults who represent God well and are a benefit to their communities and where they live. And so, we want that, which means if we've done it right, they will challenge us some, and that's what we want, even if it hurts for a minute.
So good.
Super proud of those moments when they occur.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That is amazing.
So good.
Wow. What would you say to the parent like myself that is kind of just starting out? My son is still crawling, not walking yet. The stretch of faithfulness of praying for your child. You have two sons, one out of college, other in high school. Being faithful and consistent in praying for them, and then later down the road getting to see maybe the fruit of that. Have you been able to see fruits of maybe things that you've prayed for your sons? And how would you encourage parents just starting out to walk in that?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
I know.
That's a lot.
Sorry, yes,
No, that's a great question. I wish I had done it better over time. I think when you're starting out, you're praying for where you see, they are going, right? And I think it's pretty straightforward then. But over time, you start to see their personality, and you say, oh, they are wired this way, they are going this direction, and perhaps that's really awesome, and perhaps it needs, some coaching on the edges, right? So I think that kind of informs your prayers as time goes on. But I've had people say, and in a very good way, hey, your son moved away, he's left. How do you feel about that? Isn't that kind of sad? And I'll say, well, I'm sad to see him go because I really like having him around, but I'm not going to lament that the very thing we worked so hard to do for years, he's actually done. And so that's gratifying, right? Yeah. And so that's a prayer of thankfulness. That's the very thing we wanted for them to, to get an education and to see, find their place in the world and to get a good job and to be a benefit to the community. Those are things you want. And so I think those are the things you pray for. I think you pray that they become what God wants them to do, and you align your vision with what you think that is, and then that becomes those prayerful conversations with God. It's not God make this thing happen, but it's, wow, God, we're thinking about this, we're working on this. Is this the right thing? Let me kind of try this out. And when you bounce those ideas up against a perfect being, a creator, you kind of say, maybe that's good and maybe it's not. So, but what you said is exactly right. It's the long haul.
Yeah,
it's not,
that's good.
It's not, hey, I read a devotional, I'm going to pray that today and we're good. No, I think it takes some time to build that relationship, and then therefore that faith and that trust in God, that he's listening and is there for us.
Wow.
I love that you said, each of your boys have different personalities, and as you learn that, you can then begin to even tailor and cultivate certain prayers for them. We've actually, Casey and I have discovered this in my office. There's like a prayer card for each of my children, and so like for Allie, in her before Jesus, full flesh sinfulness, Allie's still in her nature a person or a young lady of truth. right? Now, sometimes it's annoying, right? Like always like truth. So like our prayers are that she would be a woman of truth, like for Jesus, right? That she would speak truth, right? Jax is incredibly emotional. So that we would say, hey, like God, would you help him to not be controlled by his emotions, but use his emotions as a catalyzer for your kingdom, for the gospel, right? Grayson can be a bully, maybe, sometimes. And so, like, literally recently, this is very raw, but we've been praying that God would he use that sense of being able to push people around, but to be someone of for justice, someone that speaks on behalf and acts on behalf of other people. He's actually really sensitive to what's happening in Ukraine right now. Like, which he's 4 years old, he's our youngest, but he keeps asking about, because something in him knows that it's wrong, and so he's like, I think he said something about like he would fight. Like he'd be like, I'll fight them. And I'm
Sweet
like,
boy.
you know, so I love the idea of understanding and learning their personalities and helping to guide even your prayers for them, which is really beautiful.
Well, and I think then that informs then how we help raise them, right?
Exactly.
So once you know that, you're not just praying, help my son or my daughter be this way, but you're thinking, well, what can I do to partner with God to help get there, right? And so it's not a God fix it. It's a hey, God, we're in this together. I mean, you gave me these kids. I want to do right by them. What do I involve them in, right? And then you're praying for that. And so it kind of reinforces things.
It's almost like when sharpening a knife. As a parent, you're helping get them at the right angle as you're so that it sharpens it, not so that it dulls it. And I don't do a lot of knife sharpening, but at least have the concept. Right. So as parents, knowing that, you're like, okay, how can I get them to the right place that literally is going to sharpen what God wants to cultivate in them. So
it's a lot of it sounds like a lot of relinquishing of control. There's not much room in this to say, this is what I want my kid to be, this is how they're going to be it, and I'm going to make sure it happens. Or even just in our own lives, this is how I want my prayer life to be, I'm going to make it happen. There's a lot of surrender, a lot of trust that's required in that process.
Yeah, I think so. I think back to if I look at my kids, if we rewind, 10, 15 years ago, they start playing sports, and then they really start playing sports. And before I know it, we're playing sports every weekend. We're gone. Oftentimes Rebecca is with one in one state, I'm with one, with the other in another state. I never thought we would play this much sports ever. Certainly looking at my clogging would not have made you think I was going to be super sporto, right? But once we saw that was the trend, so you talk about relinquishing control. Okay, I can either say, well, I didn't play soccer, therefore you can't play soccer, or I can say, oh, you enjoy that, that's good for you. Let's go cultivate that. So now getting back to prayer. Well, God, how should this look in our family, right? And so this is something they have an interest and an aptitude in. And so you think, okay, so what are the lessons we're learning from that? So we're praying about that. We're talking to the kids about that. I don't have to go create brand new common ground with my kids if we're already do something they have an interest in. So much easier to have a conversation. You're on the way back from the ball game. You got 2 hours in the car. They're a captive audience. Hey, we're going to talk about whatever, or maybe we just get to have some silence. Either way,
that's good.
That's cool.
Man.
I love that.
So I think maybe kind of closing things out. There's a lot that. And I think you know this, but there's a lot of wisdom and perspective that you can provide, right? Because we talk about this long haul, this faithfulness. You've sent off one bird from the nest, and the other one is closely behind. If someone is listening, and even I'm thinking about my students, like in my class at the Institute, there's so much that they don't know, and sometimes that can be a little frustrating, like because you want them to come on, you can get this. So if you were to speak to the late teens, early 20s about the importance of rhythms in their life, speaking from someone who's done that over the decades, like what would you tell them? What would you instill into them?
I would say find other people, respected adults older than them. They're kind of in that young adult area. Older adults who have gone down this path, peers who are going down this path, and learn from them. I mean, if I look at my, I see, I remember my mom and my dad and my brother praying. I remember people in church who I respected praying, right? And you hear that, and it's not, hey, Jud, you should pray, but it's, this is what we do. And you can't help but copy the good things that people who you respect.
You've observed it.
Absolutely. And you think, well, they're successful. They're tracking. They handle things well. They're not perfect, but look at the good here. So you think, so maybe see what I can learn from that. It's tough to do anything alone.
Yeah.
But if you have those people in your life who you see that being modeled, it's so much easier. And you have a relationship. You can say, "Hey, I heard you pray that. Tell me about that." I would hear people pray sometimes. I would think, I would never talk to God that way. But after you process it, you think, that's really cool. I'm going to roll that into what I'm doing. So, just trying to do things on your own. It's a great way to repeat the same loops.
Yeah.
So I would encourage them to find trusted people who share their values, but may not share their same practices and ideas, and learn from those, and be humble enough and to take some time and to listen.
Man, it's so good. And that's the theme that we've been seeing. It's like the combination of the community that you surround yourself and then the rhythms that you adapt and adopt together really form us. They shape and form us to what we ultimately become. And so we're just saying, why not be intentional? Why not be purposeful with both of those things?
Yeah, and you can start that anytime, right? I mean, it's
not too late.
There's no way any of us will do it perfect. And people say, well, I'm not good at this particular discipline. Well, that's okay. Nobody starts out good at any of these things. We're not wired that way. That's the work of the Spirit in us, right? So, say, hey, today I'm going to do this, and maybe tomorrow, it'll be more or less, it'll be different. But to just get in there and do, I think is super critical.
Yeah.
No matter how old you are. You mentioned me being at the young continuum of this church. You know that I'm not.
Yes.
But even where I am along that, I still wake up thinking, hey, I can learn this. I can be better at this. I don't want to get stuck here.
Yep.
And having good people in your life to help move you that direction, man, there's a ton of value there.
That's so cool. And Sophia, you've been able to enter into a relationship with a younger person as kind of a mentor.
Yes. Yeah, that has been so wonderful and such a cool experience. I was super intimidated by the idea of becoming a mentor because I still feel like, well, I need a mentor. I could learn. I'm still so young. I don't know what I'm doing. But realizing actually like the season that person's in, I've already been there.
That's right.
And I can contribute something. And so I think all of us have things that we can contribute that we've learned from God, no matter what age you're at, what season of life you're in. So just embracing that, I think, can be so important.
Yeah. That's so good. I'm so glad you were able to do that.
Yeah.
And she's really excited.
Yes.
Well, and you have a lot to offer. You should not. You shouldn't underestimate the value, either of you, that you bring. I mean, I've seen that myself just hanging out with you both. So you have a lot to give.
Thank you, Jud. I appreciate that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And it's almost, in some ways, not even enough of a short podcast episode to capture how much you actually have to offer in wisdom and insight. And so I hope that it is just a snapshot for people to think long-term in the long haul and what it will produce. And I also want to say, I think there's going to be so much of benefit because I think a lot of people will relate to you. You're very analytical and methodical. You're very strategic. And it's why you're good at your job. But that also influences the way that you relate to God. And you've kind of embraced that and you've learned and grown in that. And I think it will help people who see themselves as similar to you that maybe otherwise kind of feel like, well, I don't relate to Sophia or to Brett, or we had Robin Fouts on. I don't relate to her, but it's like, oh, Jud, I relate to him, right?
Well, and different personalities. I think that's important, and how you can find somebody to relate to. And I'm super blessed that I've had some really good examples in my life over time. I mean, there's nothing I've said here that's original to me. I mean, these are some of these are long held truths, and some of these are things that I learned from other people seeing them. So, like we said earlier, if you're hanging out with folks who can help make you better and you can learn from, a ton of value there, and it's a great conversation to have. I've had a ball. It's been great.
That's so good. And one of the greatest people in your life is Rebecca. So thanks for sharing her with our church and with my family. We've utilized her wisdom and insight many a times and many more to come. So thanks, Jud.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the chance to be here.
Yeah.